Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? A quote used from Ronald Reagan during his 1980s presidential debate from YouTube.com, uploaded by Mark Besh on March 3rd, 2011. We, the American people, need to know the most efficient economic system to ensure prosperity. Everyone in the room has heard of Ronald Reagan to some degree. Today with us is, we have actually an expert on Reaganomics. With the current current economic conditions we are experiencing today, we would like you to help us restore Reaganomics into our country. Today we will discuss the economic conditioning of the 1970s, Reaganomics, and questions regarding our topic. First, let's hear from our aspiring presidential candidate, Kyle Lazar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, first, I'd like to talk about Keynesian economics. Well, to best define Keynesian economics, I'd have to refer to the textbook by Robin Bade and Michael Parkin titled Fundamentals of Macroeconomics, published in February of 2014. What this book states about this theory is that it is the belief that the free market is inherently unstable, and government must intervene, and when government intervenes, it boosts the economy and it decreases unemployment rates. We first saw a rise in Keynesian economics during the 1930s and what we call the Great Depression. Now, many economists claim that Keynesian economics got us out of the Great Depression. However, that is debatable. Now we fast forward to the 1970s, where the government was very big in size and it was spending a lot of money into the economy. Now, Keynesian economists would believe that the 1970s would be a time of booming economic conditions. However, according to Peter Ferreira in the article titled Reaganomics versus Obamonomics, Facts and Figures, published on May 5th, 2011 by Forbes.com, he states that during the 1970s, with big government spending, there was double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates, and double-digit unemployment. Keynesian economists were stunned. And with the dire state of the economy, it gave rise to a future presidential candidate named Ronald Reagan. Once you understood Keynesian economics and the state of the economy in the 1970s, I'd like to talk about Reaganomics. Reaganomics is modeled after what we call as supply-side economics. And referencing the same textbook, supply-side economics is basically reducing the barriers placed on individuals to create products and services. It's a very pro-free market, pro-business type of approach to the economy. And Reagan modeled it after that. Now, according to the Peter Ferreira in the article I said earlier, Reagan had 4 goals in mind when he came into office. He wanted anti-inflationary monetary policies, he wanted to cut spending, he wanted deregulation, and he wanted to cut taxes. The first 3 I stated are relatively easy to understand. However, where there's a lot of discrepancy in Reagan's policies comes to taxes. And here I am here today to describe Reaganomics and the tax portion of Reaganomics. Now, to first understand Reagan's idea of taxes, you must understand the Laffer curve. Laffer curve was created by an economic advisor to Ronald Reagan named Art Laffer. And what he told Ronald Reagan is that during the 1970s, we were on this downward sloping side of this curve. And x-axis is tax rate, and y-axis is tax revenue. And if you're on this side of the graph, Art Laffer believed that you were slowing down economic progress. Not only that, taxes were so high that if you cut taxes, you would actually increase revenue received by the federal government. So Reagan really liked this policy, and he wanted to implement it. He came into office in 1981, and at the time, according to Peter Ferreira, the top marginal tax rate was 70%. Top marginal tax rate is simply the tax rate placed on the highest income earners in this country. Now, what Reagan did is he took that 70% and reduced it to 50%. And for all other tax brackets, he reduced that by 25% across the board. Now, later on in 1986, he even simplified the tax code further by reducing that 50% to 28%, and the rest of the brackets were all 15%. So there's only 2 brackets at that time in 1986, a 28% bracket and a 15% bracket. Now, let's talk about the impact of his tax cuts. According to Peter B. Sperry on the article titled The Real Reagan Economic Record, published on March 1st, 2001 by Heritage.org, it says not only did the economy boom because of the tax cuts, because tax cuts is putting more money in our pockets, and it is boosting the private sector, which determines the output of a country. Now, not only did it boost the economy, it also increased tax revenue, and Art Laffer was correct. In 1981, before any tax cut was made, the total revenue received by the federal government was $517 billion. Now, after all tax cuts were made by Ronald Reagan, by 1990, the federal government was receiving $1 trillion worth of tax revenue. Now, the theory that Ronald Reagan and Arnold Laffer came up with was correct.
Thank you, Mr. Lazar, for sharing the history of the Keynesian economics of the 1970s and Reaganomics of the 1980s. Now, are there any questions at this time? Yes, you, Mr. News Reporter.
Hi, I'm George from the Daily News. I have 2 questions for you. According to the article titled Tax Reform Might Start with a Look Back to '86 by Floyd Norris, published on November 22, 2012 by NewYorkTimes.com, he states that Reagan increased the capital gains tax from 20% to 28%. Could this increase on capital gains tax be the reason why revenue increased?
Well, that's a great question, and to best answer your question, I'll have to cite Dan Bongino on his podcast titled Who Checks the Fact Checkers When It Comes to Taxes? That was uploaded on April 13th of 2015. Now, he states the same thing, and I'll explain the reason why and the real-world impact. The reason why Ronald Reagan increased it from 20% to 28% was in order to match the top marginal tax rates. What the wealthy Americans in this country could do is instead of taking an income, they can take a stock option. And stock options are subject to the capital gains tax rate. Now, if it was still at 20%, the wealthy Americans could just take stock options and pay a lower tax rate. So Ronald Reagan wanted to decrease that loophole, and he wanted to just match them, so no matter how you get your money, you are subject to that 28% tax rate. And now to talk about the real-world impact, also according to Dan Bongino. When it was 20% tax rate, the government was receiving $52 billion worth from capital gains. However, once it was increased to 28%, the government received only $39 billion. So to answer your question, no, they actually saw a decrease in revenue from capital gains.
Also, according to the YouTube video, Recent Presidents Who Increased the National Debt, uploaded on January 28, 2010 by Americans Wake Up, it states Reagan tripled the national debt. Could you explain this?
Yes, I can. And to best answer this question, I have to revert to Mark Levin on his podcast titled The Mark Levin Show, which was aired on April 29, 2015. Now, he also worked for the Reagan administration, so he really knows what he's talking about. And what a president can do is propose a budget to Congress. Remember, legislative branch makes the laws. The executive branch, which is a part of the president, can only enforce the laws. So he proposed a budget to Congress, and Congress, every time he proposed a budget to Congress, they deemed it dead on arrival. Now, what that means is that there's no way his budget proposal was going to be passed. And why is that? Because they knew the opposing party controlled Congress at that time, and they knew Ronald Reagan wanted to cut spending. However, they were not willing to. And as you can see by this graph, as I was stating earlier, revenue was steadily increasing throughout Reagan's presidency. However, spending was also increasing. And as we all know, that the power of the purse is controlled by the House of Representatives. So I would say that it's not fair to blame Ronald Reagan for the debt because he had no control over it.
Thank you, George, for the question regarding capital gains tax and Reagan's debt. Is there any other questions on the floor? Yes, you, Mr. News Reporter.
Hi, I'm Adam from XYZ.com, and I have a couple questions today. So my first question is, according to the YouTube video, President Obama wins on unemployment. Romney loses, published on October 10, 2014. It states that President Obama, who is a believer in demand-side economics, unemployment rate is down to 5.7%. How does Reagan's unemployment numbers compare?
Well, to best demonstrate that, I'd have to refer to these graphs. On the left side, you can see is Obama. On the right side is Ronald Reagan. Now, the top 2 graphs over here is the unemployment rate. Top left is Barack Obama's unemployment rate. As you can see, throughout his presidency, it was steadily decreasing. And same thing with Reagan. It peaked when Ronald Reagan came into office. It was a recession year in 82 to 83. Now, what happened after that? Ronald Reagan's unemployment number went down to 5%, similar to Barack Obama. However, where the big discrepancy comes in between unemployment numbers is you have to look at labor force participation, simply meaning how many employed people and unemployed people were working compared to the population. Now, under Barack Obama, more and more people are dropping out of the labor force. If you are unemployed and are not looking for a job, you are no longer counting the unemployment number. This steadily decrease of labor force participation means people are no longer looking for jobs, and that is skewing Barack Obama's numbers. However, if you take a look at Ronald Reagan, labor force participation was going up, meaning there was more people looking for jobs or either had a job. So I'd have to say Barack Obama's numbers are a little skewed.
Okay, so for my second question, according to the article titled Why We Must Raise Taxes on the Rich by Robert Rich, published by the HuffingtonPost.com on April 4, 2011, he states the only way we can reduce the deficit is by taxing the super rich. Doesn't this make sense?
No, the way you reduce taxes by reduce the deficit is by cutting taxes and cutting spending. According to the article I said earlier by Peter B. Sperry, as you can see, spending was also increasing. And when the most sure way you can ensure that you're not going to have a deficit is by cutting spending. Now, by taxing the super rich, they're not going to pay that tax rate. As you can see, what happened during the 1970s, high tax rate. And according to Peter B. Sperry, before Ronald Reagan cut taxes, the 1% paid 18% of all federal income taxes. However, after tax cuts, after it was cut from 70% to 28%, the rich paid 28% of all federal income taxes. You gotta remember, tax evasion is a crime, tax avoidance is not.
Thank you, Adam, for the question regarding unemployment and taxing the rich to reduce the deficit. Now, let's wrap up this conference. Today, our aspiring president has discussed the Keynesian economics and Reaganomics while addressing some counter-arguments to Reaganomics. In parting words, we would like to share a quote from Ronald Reagan. From Goodreads.com on May 4th, 2015, it goes, "Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem."